Coming live from Idaho, USA is our guest tonight. Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And before I move forward, may I request you to subscribe, follow, like, and comment on whichever platform you are watching or listening to this show on. And today we have Josh Tapp, entrepreneur and podcast host of the Apple iTunes Top 50 Marketing and Entrepreneurship Podcast, The Lucky Titan. And Josh has interviewed with over 1,500 of the world's top entrepreneurs and taken their voice to the world. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thank you so much, AJ. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be a fun one. You've got me all excited about we have an audience in India here, because that's really where we're targeting right now is working with the Indian people in the podcasting realm. So I'm super excited about that.
Thank you for taking out time to join us. And as the topic is today, Josh is on the importance of podcasts, how podcasts are being the central part of every marketing activity, why you should use a podcast at the center of your marketing and brand strategy. We'll get insights and tips from you that you talk about. You are an expert of that, and you are a fifth generation entrepreneur yourself. So who better than talking about all these things? So Josh, straightway, how do you see as an entrepreneur from that part of the world? How do you see podcasts? And then we'll come to from this part of the world. How do we see from here?
Yeah, I love that question, because podcasting in and of itself has become such a unique model. I mean, in the US, for example, right, or in the UK and most of the primary English-speaking countries, we've found that there's the adoption rate of listening to podcasts is drastically increasing. But the supply of podcasts, the people who are actually effectively podcasting, has not changed over the last 4 years. It's really intriguing. Even through the COVID-19 shenanigans, right? Everybody started launching podcasts, right? We went from 1 million to 3 million, I think it was. But active podcasts, that means people who are podcasting at least once per month, there are still only 425,000 of those. That number has not changed over the last 3 years. It's so intriguing to me, because in the US, that means there's not as much competition as everybody thinks there is for the listenership, but listenership is growing. And we haven't even touched India. We haven't even touched China yet. And I get really excited about, these Asian countries, these African countries that can start to really adopt this medium, because podcasting in and of itself is the most effective medium of getting your message across to an audience, hands down.
Right, Josh. And you see, earlier podcast was for, entertainment, sharing information, for a lot of other stuff. But now it has been contextualized in business. And that is where the big part is. And when you talk of, it becoming part of business, then it has opened the doors and windows and everything for, video podcasts also. And that is where, both ways it's growing in terms of podcast. And so your insights that will be very helpful here will be, for businesses, brands, companies, small businesses, freelancers, professionals, consultants, coaches, doctors, people who have started their own thing during this great resignation. So where does this podcast fit in? So starting from where exactly, brands, why it should be central to strategies for companies. So in a nutshell, if you can tell it, where exactly, how people can use it, why it should be central to your marketing and branding strategies, that businesses and small businesses, big businesses, brand can find their answers to this.
Yes. And I love this question, because the truth is, AJ, is that podcasting in and of itself, people look at it like it's a tool to just grow an audience of people who listen to your show, right? That actually is a product of what happens when you leverage podcasting correctly. What we found is that podcasting in and of itself is actually a very solid business tool. And I have to illustrate this with a story because I always tell people you need to tell stories, otherwise you're bored. But I for myself, these stories that we can leverage help illustrate this for you in a way that you can apply to yourself. So for me, I've actually been in the podcasting realm for over 10 years. I almost said 12, 10 years. And for the last 10 years, we've been focusing on how do we take this industry up to that next level? How do we leverage a podcast as a B2B monetization strategy, right? Business to business, or I like to call it E2E, like entrepreneur to entrepreneur, because I think
Great.
B2,
I like that.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt. I like that.
I love
E2E.
the reason why I like saying E2E is because there's like this new generation of entrepreneurs that aren't really like business people, right? I did my master's degree in business, and that is a whole different world dealing with, publicly traded companies and PE firms and all the other dumb things that quite honestly, like, don't embody entrepreneurship. They embody science and math. It's like going professional in a sport, right? Like everybody's like, oh, I want to play for the NFL, the NBA, whatever. And then when they get there, they realize it's literally just science and math. That's all it is. It's gone past it being a game anymore, right? It's the same thing with business, is that people are trying to get it so perfectly refined that they're missing the spirit of entrepreneurship. So for me, I like selling to entrepreneurs, right? I'm an entrepreneur selling to another entrepreneur, somebody who has that creative element in their life, and they want to build a business around being an entrepreneur. So I digress, but coming back to this is that in the E2E markets, right? You're a coach, you're a consultant, you're an agency, maybe at some point. You're saying, I want to sell to business people. I'm going to tell you a secret right now. You're not going to get there by posting on social media. It doesn't work that way. If you want to sell let's say you're doing hair products or makeup or something, Instagram, TikTok, these places are very, very valuable tools because that's where people are going to consume that media. But as an entrepreneur, people think they can use that same tactic on LinkedIn or on Instagram or on Facebook, and it doesn't work that way. Yes, it can supplement what you're doing, but it cannot be a core marketing strategy. The true value of E2E entrepreneurship is that actually finding those entrepreneurs has to be done through true networking, right? People are like, okay, well, then I need to join these networking groups and just go meet random entrepreneurs. I would say no. I would say leverage a podcast as that networking tool. It's what AJ and I are doing right here. I mean, we have this opportunity to meet each other, to hear each other's stories. I mean, we'll obviously be friends moving forward. AJ is an amazing guy, I can already tell. And like this opportunity for us to network gives us an opportunity to do business together. And I found for myself that if I can leverage that show, like my own show, to meet people, it becomes a very tangible business asset. Secondarily, what it does is it's a core piece of content, what we like to call a pillar piece of content that we can then repurpose and use all over the internet. You can have your social media strategies, you can have a YouTube channel, you can have a podcast, a book, all of those things by just having a podcast. Does that make sense?
Right. And there is a growing acceptance even in India. I can tell you this. I started actively doing live podcasting 6 months, 7 months in January. But I tell you, in the last 2 months, even a lot of PR agencies have started approaching me like they used to approach me during my full-fledged journalism days in CNBC or Reuters or the Press Trust of India. Now, this is the type of shift is happening, that companies want to be seen on platforms like this, and they are getting aware of the seriousness of some of these, uh, podcast shows. That is a good thing, because they are trying to reach that audience which they know that they cannot do through social media, which you said that all social media will not take them where they want to. But
Correct.
Josh, your expertise, you have talked to 1,500 entrepreneurs. That's not a small numbers. And they ask for your advice. You have this company called Podcast Multipliers also, who provide, a lot of inputs and help more than 750 entrepreneurs, and, it's to launch, monetize, and scale their own industry leading podcast. So, what do you want to tell these people? They launch their podcast. How does a small business brand can still have resource? A small business, how do they decide which path to take? Can you elaborate on that? And especially on a lot of consultants, which form a huge number of people.
Yeah, and this I love this question, AJ, because what happens is when people with small businesses, when they start seeing all of these flashy strategies, like, oh, I could run Facebook ads, I could have a YouTube channel, oh, maybe I should do Facebook Live, maybe I should. It gets so confusing because people don't have an actual strategy behind it, right? What we've built at Podcast Multipliers, and we've actually built a whole program called the Pantheon around this, is we've built a path for people, a strategy that can encompass all of those things, just starting with one solid pillar first. You know, people look at marketing like it needs to be, you know, throwing a bunch of mud on the wall and seeing what sticks, but that's really not how it works. The way that it works is you find a group of people that you really love, that you want to serve, and then you ask them what they want and you just give it to them. That's all it is. And people look at it like, oh, maybe I need to just get my product and start throwing it out there and say, who wants this, right? That's not how business works. And especially if you're in the B2B or the E2E space, I have found that so many people are out there trying to just haphazardly throw their content out there, and it doesn't work. So the way that I like to go about it, and this actually, I'm going to kind of preface this with a story. If you're watching this on live, you'll see this book here. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. I read this book at 11 years old. Okay. This book is one that everybody needs to read because this one was a paradigm shifter for me, even at 11 years old. That was when I first started my first business. It was at 11 because I said, hey, I love what they talk about in here. I'm going to go and try it. Right. And at the time, I couldn't think bigger than the lawn mowing company or maybe window washing. But hey, it was a business, and I realized, hey, I could start making some money doing other things and selling services, and it set me off on my entrepreneurial journey. But what it talks about in that book, in The Richest Man in Babylon, I would highly recommend you read it. It's about 100 pages. It talks about in that book the power of just 1,000 people, and how if you can have 1,000 people in your immediate network, you can literally touch every corner of the world. And I have seen that happen over and over and over again with our clients, with myself, and with everybody who does this methodology. A podcast allows you to conglomerate and aggregate that group of people, and you are at the center of it. You've provided them value. Those people can help you get there. You know, I have in my bio there, our team always changes the number and increases it as we meet more and more people. But when I hit 1,000 people, I went on a super awesome vacation. I went and rewarded myself. And it wasn't because, oh, hey, I'm a billionaire, but we had made millions of dollars at that point. And I realized it was exactly the number that I was told. When I hit 1,000 people in my network that I had met personally, that's when we made our money. And so I always tell people, I'm like, you need to go on the journey of 1,000 people, right? Go on that journey, meet 1,000 people and just watch what happens. Your network grows, you can generate lots of business. And I'm going to talk strategy here for just a second, AJ, because I want to give people some actionable steps to
carry on, Josh. The floor is all yours. I am a listener myself.
Well, so let me give you kind of some context here. Most people, when they come into my world, they're like, Josh, but how do I make money with a podcast? And that's the wrong question. The question is, how do I turn my podcast into a business, not into a podcast, right? I want whoever's listening to this show, if you're going to start a podcast, to stop worrying about how many people are listening to your show. That number does not matter. It'll eventually grow. It just happens, right? We have a whole service where we help people grow to 10,000 downloads on their podcast within 90 days, right? We can do that. That moves the needle in one way, but I've shown people how to literally close 7-figure deals from their show before they even have 5 listeners on their show. And the reason why is because you can leverage your show to really generate some real cash. So there's 7 different ways that we have that you can produce revenue. Obviously, we're not going to be able to dive into all 7 here on this interview today, but I do have a free document you guys can go leverage. It has a checklist. It has a mini course. Everything's tied to it. It's free so that you can actually monetize your show. There's 7 different ways you can use. The core and most important one that I always tell people is stop trying to sell your own crap, okay? I don't care if it's the world's best product, you're the world's best consultant. Stop trying to sell that for 2 minutes and just watch what happens. So the first thing I tell people, stop worrying about your listenership. The second thing is quit trying to sell your garbage. Okay. Focus first on being a solution provider. So this is what I mean. When I bring somebody onto my show, at AJ, I'm sure you'll do this with me, right? Is as I'm talking to somebody, I will listen to them and hear what they are saying. Not just what they're saying, but what they're actually saying, right? You're reading between the lines and figuring out where are they in their business journey, right? So when I interview somebody on my podcast, this is an ideal client for me. This isn't just some random Joe Schmo that might make a good interview. I'm like, this is somebody that's going to be a highly, highly valuable person to my audience, but I know that I could turn them into a sale at some point, and I know how to help them. I've been in the marketing industry for about 15 years now, and marketing in and of itself, there's about 15 different services that everybody needs to use at some point in their business journey. So I've made relationships with 15 different people who I can promote their stuff, and they will give me a commission for it. So what I do is when somebody comes on my show, I'm diagnosing where they're at, right? And just to kind of illustrate this, right? If I were to go to a doctor and I'm having heart pain, right? I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm going to a general doctor, right? Maybe like a pediatrician type doctor, right? I go to him and I say, oh, my heart's really hurting. He's like, oh, great. You know what? I've done a couple heart surgeries, and I'm gonna do yours for really cheap. It's only gonna be like $2,000. Do you think I would go with that guy? Like, there's no way I would go with that guy. But what he will do is he's like, Josh, you're having extreme heart pain. All you have to cover the cost of this visit, right? It's $150 for you to come in and do this visit. But I'm going to refer you over to the best heart surgeon in the world. He's going to do your surgery. He's done 5,000 of these over his 50-year career or whatever. And, for me, I'm going to trust that doctor now more than ever because he referred me to somebody who saved my life. It's the same thing in business. People just sit here trying to sell their own stuff. We're like people out there just, I don't know if have you guys ever been to Mexico? Have you been to Mexico, AJ, and been to like Chichen Itza? Have you ever been to that place?
No, not me.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Not yet. Maybe you got a boat. I haven't. So,
well, next time I go, you should come with me. So we went to this beautiful temple in Mexico. So I actually lived in Mexico for a couple years, and I had never gone to this temple. But last year, my wife and I went to Cancun, and it's the biggest Mayan temple out there. And I was so excited to get there. But the second you walk in the gate, it is lined with vendors. I mean, I'm talking 400, 500 people hawking their crap. And they're sitting here going, I give it for you for $1. I give you $1, right? Like, only $1. And then you'd walk up and they'd try to sell it to you for like $150, right? And it's just such a gross feeling because it's jumping out, trying to just throw your crap at people. And what people don't realize is you're doing the same thing when you're going out there trying to throw your garbage at other people. And even if it's, again, I keep saying garbage, but that's kind of my trademark, right? It might be an amazing program, but the way that you're presenting it makes it look like crap. Okay. So the way that I look at it is saying, be that prescribing physician. So when somebody comes on your podcast and they start, telling you about where they're at in business, their successes, their failures, you're going to identify, ooh, this person needs lead generation. This person needs help with their Instagram. This person needs help with their podcast, right? And then what I do is instead of just hopping off the call and saying, hey, that was a great interview, see ya, I spend about 30 minutes after my calls with them saying, hey, I really loved your story. I know somebody who can help you with this specific area of your business, right? Do you want me to make the introduction? I can tell you right now, 3 out of every 5 introductions I make end up buying what I refer them to. So when I'm interviewing people on my show, I have a 3 out of 5 chance of making anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000 to refer them somewhere, right? So if I'm interviewing somebody every day, we're sitting on a $500,000 business by just interviewing somebody every day. And people sit here and going, is it really that easy, Josh? It's that easy. You just have to make the relationships with people you can refer them to. But here's what happens. Somebody comes on my show. We have a great conversation. I diagnose what's happening. I prescribe a solution that is not my business, right? Most of the time, the people who come into my world are struggling with lead generation. They're like, oh, I need more leads for my B2B business. I have an incredible agency that we've used many times. They do a fantastic job generating leads. So I refer them over to this lead generation agency. This lead generation agency charges them like $3,000 to $5,000 a month, and then they kick me like $1,000 a month on autopilot every month. This person stays. The cool thing about this, I do none of the work. I didn't even close the deal. I just said, you need to meet this person. They meet that person. I get my monthly commission check, right? And I just have to pause here and ask you, like, what would $1,000 do for you? Straight cash flow, something you don't have to work for. That's the question you need to be asking yourself. How many of your products would it take for you to keep $1,000 a month in your business? I can guarantee you it's a lot more than you think. But this is what happens. When I refer them to somebody else, and I know that person is going to treat them so well, provide them an incredible experience, I have now earned the trust of the person I referred. They're like, you had me on your show. You introduced me to these people who are like changing my business. And then they always come back to me like, Josh, what the heck do you do? Like, what's your business? I don't even have to go and hawk my crap to them because they come asking me for it. They're like, what is it? I just feel like I owe you now. And then we pitch them our service, and the close rate is extremely high. We have anywhere from a 60 to an 80% close rate with these people because we don't rush to the sale. We help them get what they need. Then we provide them what they want, right? Does it make sense?
Right.
It's an incredible model. And that's one of the 7 ways to monetize your podcast. But people sit here trying to get sponsors and all these other things. And it's like, you have money sitting right there. You've already made these relationships. Just leverage them to generate some actual cash.
Right. Right.
That's it.
Right. Now, great. That's a lot of insight, and I'm sure for more people will obviously go and understand and get a lot of resources from your website, your links and all. So obviously, I'll ask you to share your link, but I'll also put it on my YouTube description so that they can find it easy to reach you. Now, in terms of podcasts for businesses, like for brands and businesses who are a bit on larger in size, now they don't have to worry about numbers and all, but how best can they use or make podcasts as the center of their marketing and branding strategy? How do they do that?
That is a fun question, because what we've been talking about for the whole beginning of this interview is for somebody who's like, I need this to make money, right? I need to generate sales. But there's a big group of people who are saying, hey, I'm making millions of dollars already, or maybe hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, but I still want to have a podcast and I want it to be successful. Here is what a podcast actually does for you. It creates actionable, high value, high potency content. Now, here's the thing. Going on live is amazing. It's a great way to grow an audience. Doing a YouTube channel, great way to grow an audience. What podcasting does, it's not about growing an audience. It's actually about sustaining your audience and helping give value to people who already follow you. What we found is that, so we work with some multi-billion-dollar brands, and they come to us like, we need help with podcasts. We have a whole service where we go through and help them actually build the podcast. But what we found is that they're wanting to use the podcast as a way to generate a new audience. But when we actually apply it correctly, it keeps their audience there longer. It keeps their clients sticking. It keeps the people who follow them. It helps increase how quickly they will come and start buying that person's product or service. And the cool thing about having a podcast is it is the only medium, the only type of media you can consume while doing something else. You can't be running outside and watching a YouTube video. It'll make you sick, right? You can't be sitting there working out, watching a video. It's like there's all these different places. Driving, you should not be watching a video. Please don't watch a video while you're driving. But a podcast, you can consume it auditorially, right? It's something you can consume while you're doing something else. The fun part is they've done all sorts of scientific studies too, is that people who listen to podcasts are actually the most affluent audience on the planet, because they are constantly trying to improve themselves and or constantly entertaining themselves, right? But it's actually them consuming good, wholesome media that allows them to become more successful. the average income of somebody listening to a podcast is like 5 times higher than somebody who watches YouTube or who spends a lot of time on social media, right? It's really, really intriguing. So if you have a larger business and you're like, hey, this is more of a branding play, here's what we do. We say, take that podcast, so sit down for at least 10 minutes and either record a solo cast where it's just you, the talking head video, or you do what AJ's doing, right? Interview somebody. You take that one piece of content, you take the video from it, you put it on YouTube. You take the audio from it, you post it all over iTunes, Spotify, all those places. You get it transcribed and you write a blog post off of it. And those are your 3 big core pieces of content that every business is starving for. And you did it in 10 to 20 minutes, right? Maybe an hour. Let's just say it takes you an hour once a week to do that. But then from those 3 core pieces of content, you can find little highlight snippets that can become caption videos or audiograms, or you then can take any quotes and make them little static images that you can post all over social media. What we personally do is we do the 3 core pillars. So we do the video, the audio, and the blog. But then what we do is we cut each episode into 6 pieces of micro content, right? So it becomes quote cards, audiograms, caption videos, and then we drip those out over 6 months on 5 different platforms. It ends up becoming 30 pieces of content. So you basically have daily content from 1 hour of your time. Isn't that crazy? That strategy, that multi-purposing strategy, is really that next level way to grow your brand, because what will happen is when somebody tries to find you and you're pitching them your product or service, they're going to go Google you. They're going to look at you on social media. If your brand isn't cohesive and look the same, feel the same, hear the same on every platform, you're going to fail. They need to have a consistent experience with you no matter what platform they're on. And that's what repurposing that content does for you.
Okay, Josh. Now, in terms of brands, companies, small businesses, consultants, coaches, suppose if they start their own podcast. Now, how do they connect with their audience? Because their audience is also their potential client or existing client. How do they connect with them? What should their messaging be?
Love that. I love this. So if you're interviewing somebody, if you want to do an interview style podcast, quit trying to interview people who are above your ideal client. So if you want people to listen to your show, let's just say you want your audience to consist of consultants who are making $100,000 a year. Don't go interview Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or Tony Robbins, right? A lot of people think you should do that. I don't believe that's the case. What we have found is that you should be interviewing other people who are at $100,000, other consultants who are at $100,000 or maybe $200,000. They're just one little half step further along the journey than your ideal client. That person, A, will buy from you, but B, they are going to tell a story that will resonate with your ideal audience. That's how we get them to stick. And there's 3 things that I recommend everybody does if you're going to interview. And if you're not going to interview, apply these same 3 things to yourself. Every episode of your podcast needs to contain these 3 things. You need to have one good story. You need to have one solid, actionable tip. And you need to have a call to action to apply that tip. So let me give you an example, right? So let's just say I tell the story about my book, right? I hold up this book and I talk about The Richest Man in Babylon. I do that like every time I'm interviewed because this is actually the exact copy of that book. I say, hey, I'm looking to gather 1,000 of the world's best humans on the planet, right? We're here to help amplify and elevate their mission. Here's the story of why I do this. The second thing that I do is then say, now, if you are somebody who wants to be a thought leader or something like this, here's what you can do. Go find 1,000 humans. So today what I want you to do is I want you to go out and make a list of 10 people. Okay, that's my action tip that I give them. That's the second step, right? That's the tactic that I give them. Make a list of 10 people that you already know who you should connect with to discuss your mission with them, to share your mission with them. And then my call to action is saying, I want you to go contact all 10 of those people today. Okay, it takes you 5 minutes to contact those people. That is a good interview, or that's a good piece of content. And what happens with that is that people, when they come and listen to your show and they hear a great story that connects with them, they get a good actionable piece of advice that they go apply. they will come back and say, okay, what's next? What's your next piece of advice, right? Or maybe what's your next guest piece of advice? I have found that for myself, especially as an entrepreneur, the podcasts that I consume, that I listen to, give me tips that I can go use today. The ones who don't, I usually don't go back and listen to them. And the reason why is because I didn't get something outside of that interview that made me want to come back. The thing that most people don't realize is the people who are providing good business to business content, it's not just tactics and tips. It's really great story. They have a lot of really good stories. And I have actually not done a good job of this on today's interview of doing story, but it's early. I'm sorry. I'll be better with you next time. But it's telling a lot of good story, but giving actionable advice that people can go use today, that is a big game changer, right? And it doesn't always mean, hey, go download my free PDF, right? Because I have my whole mini course, everything I even plugged earlier, right? They can go see that, go use that, but that's not always the best actionable piece of advice because that benefits me directly. But if I tell each of you, go make a list of the 10 people that you really want to connect with and invite them to an interview for your podcast, if you will do that, make a post about it, tag me, I will personally respond to it, right? Because I want to reward you for saying you did this. I will even promote the interview for you just because you went out and did that step. That's a good, solid call to action for people that they can go use. I can be there to support them. And then they have built that connection with me and with you, AJ, because you put this together, right? That is such a huge value. And if you'll do that, people will come back over and over and over again.
Okay. So now people decide this, what you call brands, companies, and freelancers or consultants. They decide that yes, they will have a podcast. So then the big question is, who hosts the podcast for them? How do they go about it?
So they're saying, and you're talking big brands, right?
And all, even small businesses also. So who does? They become lead generators, or what do they become podcasters? How do they manage it? What is your advice for all these segments?
Yeah. So what I tell people is don't get so hung up on producing this Jimmy Fallon quality show, right? We all know Jimmy Fallon, right? Hilarious, really fun to watch guy. Don't go try to produce a show like that right off the bat. You don't have the money for it. Even if you're a $1 billion company, you don't have the budgets to go and build a ridiculous studio, right? Start with your phone. If you have an iPhone or an Android, there are free apps you can download on these things and literally have a conversation with somebody, record it. That is an interview, right? But what what you're asking about, AJ, about where, like, who should be hosting it. If you're a bigger company and you have multiple people, it's the person I like to call the dancing monkey. It's the relatable personality, right? We think about, like, have you ever seen The Grinch, How the Grinch Stole Christmas? I don't know if you've seen that one, the Jim Carrey one. He has this giant monkey that's like clanging the cymbals. That's what I feel like every day. That's like, I go out and evangelize our brand. I'm clanging the cymbals saying, hey, we have a really cool brand, right? And every company has somebody like that. If you're a solopreneur, it's you. Even if you don't feel like you're that person, you're an introvert, it's okay. If you're an introvert, interview people. It's way easier than trying to sit in front of a camera and speak. It's hard enough.
Right.
I've been doing this for 10 years. When I go to sit down and record an actual video of me just staring at the camera and talking, it takes me 5 to 6 takes before I'm confident with that take. But in an interview, never skip a beat, right? And I'm more of that introverted personality type. But if you have more employees or you have people on your team, find that person who's just that fun personality, right? Who are like, hey, I want you to be that fun personality who can be the face of the company, because the podcast content will become that face, right? It will become the person that people look to when they see your brand. And if you're smart about it, the way that we actually have gone about it, every single member of my team, we have 17 employees, all of them have their own podcast. And what happens is they're all about different topics. Our copywriters are not super business savvy people. They're talking about copywriting. They're talking about writing books and things like this. But then they always mention the Pantheon, which is our service that we're highly promoting, right? They're always mentioning it. They're not even pitching it. They're just like, oh yeah, so my work at the Pantheon, we did this, this, and this. And what's so funny is because we have so many different personalities and so many different areas talking about it, we end up having sales come through the door because they're doing it. And the funny thing is, most of these people, most of my employees, they use this app called Anchor.fm. It's a free app. They set up an interview with somebody. They send them that link. They record right there. click publish, done. They don't edit it, they don't do anything, and that's their podcast. And the fun part about that is that anybody can do that, right? You don't have to have a whole production team. When you start generating money from it, roll that into making the production better and getting better guests and getting a better mic, getting a fun studio set up. There's so many ways to roll that money in, but I say start there. Start with finding that great host. And in some cases, if you're like, I am just terrified to run my own podcast, but I'm willing to do the work as far as production goes, find somebody else that you want to partner with. So let's just say you're a consultant and you're doing business consulting. Find an agency that you would love to promote, where you're like, these guys are amazing. I've loved their service. I promote them all the time. Talk with them about doing, we call it a co-branded podcast. So you go to them and say, hey, you've got a really fun personality. How about we do a little back and forth conversation, or would you want to host this and I will edit it, right? That's the best way to find a host. Is I think people get so hung up in like, I have to do it, so I'm scared to do it, and they don't move forward. But there's so many different places you can leverage and people you can leverage to see that success.
Right. And my last question, not question actually, if you can share about your Pantheon method, your proprietary method for scaling industry level podcasts.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So the Pantheon, I've really kind of been touching on it here throughout this whole thing, but the Pantheon is actually a 7-phase process to go from you don't even have a podcast to you have an industry leading podcast that generates 6 and 7-figure deals from it. So that's our proprietary system. We actually have a free download for you guys that you can go. Like I mentioned, it's got a course, it's got a checklist and a full 7-phase document, so you can go through it and actually start to monetize your podcast from today. It's at howtomonetizeapodcast.com. It's the fastest way to get into our world. The Pantheon in and of itself is an invite only group, but what we do is we look at people who actually look at our documents, or we know them personally, and then we invite them to the Pantheon, because what we're doing is really, if I were just to share my mission, I'm on a mission to find 1,000 of the world's best people and to elevate their voices, amplify what they're doing, because I think we can really change the trajectory of the world always feels too big in a lot of cases, but I really think we can change the trajectory of content. I think so many people are putting just garbage content out there, and we're really changing the face of that by bringing these people together. And we have an amazing group of people so far already being a part of that. So that's the Pantheon.
Right, Josh. Lots of tips, lots of information, and a lot of learning in this interview, which is 37 minutes, 48 seconds, 49 seconds till now. But this is only a small bit of time, and one can only extract as much as possible from you within this time span. For more, they have to either, look at your website, at all the resources that you offer. And beyond that, if they want, they have to connect with you. So how do they do that? How do they look at your resources? How do they reach you online? And how do they reach you offline? How do they?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and what I always tell people is, because I always tell my guests this, don't give 5,000 links. I say, go to howtomonetizeapodcast.com. That website is the gateway to our world. Like I actually reach out to people from there individually and check in on how they're doing. Those are my people, right? Because they're saying, hey, I'm ready to build a legacy. I need some help with it. How do we do it? And that's what it's all about for us. So go to howtomonetizeapodcast.com.
Okay. Fine, Josh. I think that sums up for today. And there is I'll take a lot of learning for myself and understand how to actually, bring more value to my audience. I'm not a industry, I'm not a company, I'm not a very big podcaster, but I will certainly try and learn as much as possible from whatever you are doing. You are a very experienced podcast host yourself and an entrepreneur. So all the best in whatever you are doing for everybody, helping entrepreneurs and a lot of good human beings. I can see that in whatever you are doing. So with all this, it's a wrap on this edition of the KAJ Masterclass. Thank you so much, Josh, for joining us.
Yes, thank you. What a fun conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.